Hi, just a quick FYI. Both the speed paints and the commentary you will see and hear after this disclaimer were recorded a long time ago. The speed paint for this week and also week 8 are from August, and the commentary for this one is from September, so I may be saying stuff that no longer applies to me, and the skill level of this video and the next one doesn't reflect on my current skill level, because they were both recorded way before I even began thinking of Fanartober. I just procrastinated on editing this video for way too long and then couldn't find the time. Sorry about that. Hi and hello! After week 6 and that small breather I took, it's time to get back on track and continue with the journey of my actual, more deliberate practice. This is week 7, which means there will only be one more video like this in the series, since I'm pretty content with the level I have achieved. Now, week 7 was, for the most part, exactly the same as week 5. I looked back on the very first drawing I did on day 1 of week 1, where I drew 4 different, very random characters from imagination to see what my skill level was at. The only one who has never gotten any glow up since then was this last character right here, and that was his time to shine. As I said, my schedule was going to be pretty much the same as before. In week 5, I already did some research and practice about the proportions of anime heads and faces and eyes and all of that stuff, but I did it for a female character at the time, and this was going to be not only a man, but also someone significantly older than the rest of them. There are differences between younger and older characters, which is why I still repeated exactly what I did in week 5, but with older characters in mind this time. And it was weirdly difficult. I had a vague idea of what age range and appearances I wanted for my OC, but when I started looking for references, there were very few that actually fit my own criteria. I felt like the majority of the characters that would come up on my search either looked way too young or way too old, even if technically, canon-wise, they were within the range I was looking for. Some 30-something-year-olds looked like teenagers, which is a very anime thing to do if you think about it. And some looked like retired men in the peak of their alcoholism stage. By the time I gathered enough references to study, my life points were really low. I need to thank one of my friends for helping. I never told them why I needed these anime images, but they sent me a bunch and I actually used them, and it helped a lot. I can only confidently say that one other thing that helped was having more practice. So in week 5, the first day when I was tracing and studying and then doing my best to draw only from notes took much longer, with the result being not as good. But this time, taking notes took the majority of time, while drawing the first face went by surprisingly smoothly. Not only that, but unlike week 5, where I had to draw the face from my notes twice to get a result I liked, this week I was pretty satisfied with just this one first attempt. I believe it's the week 6 of practice that made all the difference between the two, because I already made myself draw faces that weren't a direct copy of the references, plus I remembered the mistakes I made about the eyes before. Looking back on it, I kind of wish I spent more time on the face, because it's kind of too slim for the kind of person I envisioned this character to be, but as a small spoiler, I will say that this will be more or less rectified in the final drawing. So yeah, day 1 was a surprise and a success, and day 2 was eye-opening, in a not so good way. I definitely underestimated how difficult it would be to come up with a male, non-teenage hairstyle, especially when it's supposed to be a somewhat realistic hairstyle and not one of those crazy ones from fantasy shows. Don't get me wrong, I do love me some long-haired men, or the hairstyles that defy the laws of physics, but I needed something more normal for my OC. He's just a guy, and I was adamant about refusing to use the typical teenage isekai protagonist hairstyle. So once again, the search for references took me way longer than it had any right to, and even once I did decide on 3 of them, I realized that short hair really is difficult to draw. I was already struggling with short hair for my other girl OC, but when I looked at the references for guy hairstyles, I was at a loss of where to even start. Especially the last one, where the hair is supposed to be really short, it seemed almost wrong. Like, in my head I was going, is this really okay? It's anime. Isn't it supposed to be more wild, more interesting? I don't know. My internal struggles manifested themselves in the fact that while actually sketching those hairstyles didn't take too long-ish, once I actually sat down to it, picking which one I would prefer took way longer. And that time can't even count as practice because I'm literally just sitting down with my arms crossed and frowning at the screen while trying to make a decision. I do like the colors I decided on though. It was a quick coloring session and I definitely didn't give him as many details as I did for my other OC in week 5, but that's again because I was just not too comfortable with picking colors to begin with. There were 2 things I had to consider. First one was fairly simple. Do I really need to draw a full body illustration? I know I did it for my other OC, but was it really genuinely needed? And the second thing was, do I really need to suffer through drawing backgrounds again? In the end, after some consideration, I decided that the answer to both of these questions was no. There was literally nothing holding me hostage to do these 2 things, maybe other than my own ambition. Under any other circumstances, I may have caved and done a full body with a background anyway, but since at the time I had already planned what I would do for week 8 and that it would be the last video of the series, I decided there's really no need to force myself to draw something I didn't feel like drawing. So that's some positive mental points for me, yay. Unfortunately, however, with positive points come some complications. If I'm not drawing a full body or any background, then whatever I do end up drawing will become the main focus of the illustration. And if that something is only a character's half body and nothing else, I really need it to look at least decent if I don't want to let myself down. That's how we come to a point where I curse my past self for the choices I made. Because on day 1 of week 1, I made a terrible mistake of giving my OC this type of outfit. I could have given him literally anything else to wear, but no, I had to go for the gym type. There's nothing wrong in it per se, it's just that I kept avoiding anatomy like it was the worst thing to ever happen, and now the focus of my drawing would be a human body. And it was during my clothes practice session that I realized even if I gave him a shirt, it still wouldn't be enough. Technically, I already drew arms in week 5 and 6, but it's different. Those were the easy type, the type where I went, yeah, that looks anime enough. But this OC is meant to be the gym type. Maybe not the bulky type, but he definitely works out. I can't just give him anime noodle arms. Hence day 4 and my very first attempts at anatomy. So the way I went about it was, I looked for images of human arm models online. You know, the ones where there's no skin, only muscles, something you would see in a biology classroom. And the first arm I drew was exactly that. Then, using that arm as a reference, I tried drawing different poses. And I felt tricked. Why? Because it wasn't as hard as I expected. I'm not gonna claim my practice was perfect, and you can clearly see me messing up and struggling here and there, but over the course of these weeks, I somehow convinced myself that anatomy is the final boss, the ruthless opponent, that I would literally have one breakdown after another if I ever tried to attempt it. And I didn't. Not only was it not too bad, I also quickly realized why it wasn't as stressful as I thought it would be, because I wasn't actually learning it from scratch. To explain this, I need to give some context. I don't know how it is done in other countries, but where I grew up, everyone had to take biology classes both in middle school and in high school. It doesn't matter if you're in class that focuses on humanities, or maths, or music. In middle school, everyone gets the same biology education for the entire 3 years. And then in high school, everyone gets the same biology material in the first year, and then the second and third year are slightly different, but you still have to take them no matter the course. And in middle school, one entire year is always dedicated to the human body and all the different systems inside of it. Nerve system, the veins, bones, muscles, everything. For an entire year. I may not be able to remember everything right now because it's been over a decade since then, but there was a time in my life when I could easily recite the name of every single bone and where they were. Same with most of the muscles in the human body. I never used that knowledge before, but I still had some memories of it. And as I started sketching on this day, I realized that, yeah, these muscles do exist. I do remember them and how they're connected to one another. It's like the time when I remembered what complementary colors were, and I felt the judgment from my old arts teacher on my neck. But this time I felt the judgment from my old biology teacher instead. And after feeling a surge of confidence, I even went and practiced some hand sketches. Again, I'm not saying they're perfect or particularly good, but both of these sketching sheets took me less than 2 hours. I think it was an hour and a half or something like that. For some of you, that may still be a lot, but for me, I knew that if it were the week 4 or 3 or even week 5, it would take me so much longer. And it was a more than welcome realization that the more I practiced, the faster certain stages would be without losing their quality. Should it have been surprising? No, it is literally the most obvious conclusion one can arrive at. But was I still surprised and happy about it at the time? Hell yeah! And with those high spirits, it was time to get into the actual drawing. You could say, but Q, if that's just a half body you're drawing and no background, why would you need 3 days to draw it? Well, my friend, it's because it wasn't just a half body. It was 3 half bodies. Of the same OC, of course, because this week is just for him. Basically, after already taking the time to do all those arms and hand sketches, I felt like it would be a waste to only do one drawing, especially if I wasn't planning on giving him any background. I had the time to spare, and it would be a good practice in itself, so I thought of some random poses and got down to it. And yes, the rules from week 5 also apply here, which is to say, there are no reference being used for these whatsoever. Not for the poses, not for the colors, not even for the clothes or the hair. The only thing I had open to glance at were my notes about the facial proportions, but only for the text and not for the sketch I made of it. It was no surprise that drawing without any references to look at was more difficult than any of the practice sessions from before. Drawing from imagination is just hard, especially when it comes to OCs. As someone with a fairly visual imagination, I can recall what I have already seen pretty well with quite a few details, especially if it's something I've seen recently, but that skill can only be applied to the things I have seen, the characters that already exist. But when it comes to OCs, even if I have an image in my mind, it's always more blurred because I haven't yet decided on many aspects of that OC or on the details. It's like there are gaps my mind is leaving in places where I haven't thought of yet, and so trying to draw it is that much more difficult. I know I'm only stating the obvious, but it's been on my mind recently, so I had to let it out. But even with all of that being said, I was quite happy with how all of these 3 turned out. In the beginning of my learning journey, drawing from imagination was the most terrifying thing to ever consider, because no matter what I did, it would never look good or even satisfying. But now it does. Now almost everything I draw from imagination gets at least an okay. I'm not crazy about it all the time, but like I said, it gets a pass. Which brings us to the usual comparison. From what I recall, this last drawing from day 1 was the one I spent the least amount of time on. I was already tired by that time, or maybe I was just bored and frustrated, who knows. And I think it only took me around 10 minutes back then. But in any case, here is him once again, but better. And the difference is only 48 days of practice. You know, on one hand, I do realize that 48 days isn't even that much when it comes to learning a completely new skill. But when you look at the number of sheer hours put into it, and those hours don't include any breaks or anything, definitely feels like a lot, because it was a lot. It's a good type of feeling though. And with that being said, this is it for week 7. As always, thank you so much to anyone watching me struggle through it. There's one more week of this series left and I can't wait to share it, because after that I have even more stuff planned now that I'm better at drawing than I was weeks or months ago. And I have nothing else to say, so bye!